In 1873, in the rural village of Ashworth, Lancashire, the Victorian certainty that children knew nothing of death was shattered by an 8-year-old girl's impossible declaration. What happened to Florence Thornton would force 17 witnesses to sign sworn testimonies, compel 3 physicians to abandon their medical certainty, and remain classified in church archives for 84 years. This is the story documented in the Ashworth Parish Records, witnessed by the village doctor, the local vicar, and Florence's own school teacher. A story about a child who announced the precise hour of her death 6 weeks before her heart stopped beating. Florence Margaret Thornton was born on March 12, 1865, the youngest of 3 children to Thomas and Margaret Thornton. Her father, a mill worker, had died of consumption 2 years earlier, leaving Margaret to support the family through laundry work. Florence's elder siblings, William aged 14 and Sarah aged 11, worked alongside their mother. But Florence remained in school, her mother's fierce determination that one child would read and write fluently. The girl possessed unusual gentleness. Her school teacher, Miss Elizabeth Hartley, recorded that Florence often shared her meager lunch with hungrier classmates and spent recreation periods reading to younger children. She had inherited her father's dark curls and her mother's gray eyes, which Miss Hartley described as unnaturally perceptive for one so young. Each morning Florence rose at 5 o'clock to help her mother prepare breakfast before walking 2 miles to the village school. Each evening she returned to read aloud from the Bible while her mother worked at the washboard. Margaret Thornton would later testify that these evening readings were her only moments of peace, watching her youngest daughter's lips form words in the lamplight. On the morning of October 3, 1873, Florence woke at her usual hour. The autumn dawn broke cold and clear over Lancashire. She helped her mother hang washing in the yard, her small hands efficient with clothespins, her breath visible in the morning air. Margaret remembered her daughter humming a hymn, one they had sung together the previous Sunday. At 7:30, Florence kissed her mother's cheek and departed for school. Margaret would later recall that the kiss lingered longer than usual, that Florence's gray eyes held hers with peculiar intensity. "She looked at me as though memorizing my face," Margaret testified, "but I thought nothing of it then." At precisely 9 o'clock, as Miss Hartley called the morning register in the one-room schoolhouse, Florence Thornton raised her hand and spoke words that would echo through medical journals for decades. "Miss Hartley, I shall die on November the 14th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon." The classroom fell silent. 23 children turned to stare at Florence, who sat perfectly still at her desk, hands folded, expression serene. Miss Hartley later documented that the child's voice had changed, becoming oddly formal as though reciting a lesson learned by heart. "Florence, what a dreadful thing to say," Miss Hartley responded, attempting lightness despite the chill spreading through her chest. "Why would you speak of such matters?" Florence's gray eyes met her teacher's without wavering. "Because it is true, miss. I saw it last night in my sleep, but it was not a dream. I was shown." November 14th, a Thursday. "The church bells will ring for noon service, and I shall hear them. At 3 o'clock precisely, my heart will stop. I shall be wearing my Sunday dress, the blue one with the white collar that Mother mended last month. Dr. Ashford will be present, and you will be holding my left hand." The specificity silenced any laughter. Miss Hartley approached Florence's desk, kneeling to examine the child's face. No fever flushed her cheeks. Her pulse, when checked, beat steady and strong. Her eyes showed no signs of delirium or illness. "Who told you this?" Miss Hartley asked gently. "No one told me, miss. I simply know it. The same way I know that your sister in Manchester is expecting her third child, though you have not yet received the letter telling you so. The same way I know that Mr. Pemberton's missing pocket watch is beneath the floorboard under his desk at the counting house, where it fell through a crack last Tuesday." Miss Hartley stood abruptly. She had indeed been awaiting word from her sister, though she had told no one of her suspicions. And Mr. Pemberton, the village clerk, had complained loudly about his lost watch for 3 days. "Children, continue your arithmetic," Miss Hartley instructed, her voice unsteady. "Florence, come with me." She led the child outside, where morning sunlight did nothing to warm the October air or the fear crystallizing in her chest. Dr. James Ashford arrived at the schoolhouse within the hour, summoned by Miss Hartley's urgent message. A physician trained at Edinburgh, he had practiced in Ashworth for 23 years and prided himself on rational diagnosis. His journal entry for October 3, 1873, preserved in the Royal College of Physicians' archives, records his initial skepticism. "The child appeared in perfect health," Dr. Ashford wrote. "Pulse 72 beats per minute, breathing unlabored, pupils responsive to light. No fever, no signs of cardiac distress, no symptoms of any ailment whatsoever." Yet she spoke with disturbing certainty of her impending death, providing details that suggested either elaborate deception or something far more troubling. Margaret Thornton, summoned from her laundry work, provided a different perspective. "My Florence never lied," she testified before the parish inquiry. "Not once in 8 years did a falsehood pass her lips. When she spoke of her death, she did so with the same simple honesty she used when reciting her lessons. She was not frightened. She was not seeking attention. She was stating a fact, as one might comment upon the weather." The third crucial witness emerged unexpectedly. Reverend Thomas Blackwood, vicar of St. Michael's Church, had been visiting the school that morning to discuss preparations for the harvest festival. A stern man of 54, known throughout Lancashire for his skepticism of superstition and his adherence to rational theology, he had overheard Florence's declaration. "I confronted the child directly," Reverend Blackwood recorded in his parish diary. "I asked if she sought to frighten her classmates with morbid fantasies. She looked at me with those gray eyes and said, 'I do not wish to frighten anyone, Reverend. I simply wish to prepare those I love.' In that moment, I confess, my certainty wavered." Dr. Ashford conducted his examination in the schoolhouse with Miss Hartley, Reverend Blackwood, and Margaret Thornton present as witnesses. He tested Florence's physical responses, her cognitive function, her emotional state. Every result indicated perfect health in a child of 8 years. Then he attempted to disprove her impossible knowledge. "Florence," he said carefully, "you mentioned that Miss Hartley's sister is expecting a child. How could you possibly know this?" "I saw the letter," Florence replied. "It has not arrived yet, but it will come tomorrow morning. It bears a Manchester postmark, dated October the 1st. Her sister's name is Catherine. She writes that the baby is expected in March, and she hopes for a daughter this time." Miss Hartley's face went white. "My sister's name is Catherine," she whispered, "and she has 2 sons. But I have received no letter." Dr. Ashford pressed further. And this matter of Mr. Pemberton's watch? It fell through a crack in the floorboards beneath his desk. Florence repeated. The watch is silver with his initials engraved on the back. TRP for Thomas Robert Pemberton. It stopped at precisely 2:15 on Tuesday afternoon when it struck the ground below. Within 2 hours, Mr. Pemberton had been summoned. The floorboard was lifted. The watch was recovered exactly as Florence had described, stopped at 2:15 p.m. The engraved initials matched perfectly. Dr. Ashford's journal entry continued. I examined the child's head for signs of injury that might produce delusional states. I found nothing. I questioned her about recent illnesses, unusual dreams, any event that might explain this aberrant knowledge. She provided no rational explanation. When I asked how she knew these things, she replied simply, I was shown them, the same way I was shown my death. The critical detail emerged when Florence described the scene of her own death. I shall be in my mother's bed, she said. Dr. Ashford will be listening to my heart with his stethoscope. Miss Hartley will be holding my left hand because my right hand will be too weak. Mother will be praying by the window. The afternoon sun will be shining through the curtains, making patterns on the wall. And at 3:00, I shall simply stop. The specificity was impossible. Yet Florence spoke with absolute conviction. By evening news had spread through Ashworth's 300 residents. The village divided sharply. Mill workers dismissed the matter as childhood fantasy or attention-seeking. Several elderly women, remembering similar cases from their youth, whispered of second sight and death omens. The local magistrate, Mr. Edmund Hartwell, demanded a formal inquiry to prevent mass hysteria and superstitious panic. Miss Hartley's letter from Manchester arrived the following morning exactly as Florence had predicted. Catherine had indeed written on October the 1st, announcing her pregnancy and hoping for a daughter. The village skeptics fell silent. Something impossible was unfolding in their midst. Dr. Ashford designed a test that should have been impossible to pass. On October 8th, 5 days after Florence's initial declaration, he gathered 7 witnesses in the church vestry. He presented Florence with 7 sealed envelopes, each containing a question written by a different villager about information the child could not possibly know. The first envelope, prepared by the magistrate, asked, What is written on the headstone of my grandfather's grave in the old section of the cemetery? Florence held the sealed envelope without opening it. Her eyes closed. After a moment, she spoke. Here lies Edmund Hartwell, born 1789, died 1851. Beloved husband and father. Beneath this inscription is carved, His word was his bond. The stone is gray granite, and moss has grown over the right corner. The magistrate's face drained of color. That is precisely correct, he whispered. I have not visited that grave in 20 years. The moss detail is accurate. The second envelope, from a mill worker named John Davies, asked about the contents of a locked box in his attic. Florence described 3 letters from his deceased brother, a silver thimble belonging to his mother, and a pressed flower from his wedding day. When Davies returned home and opened the box, every item matched her description. The third envelope contained the most disturbing test. Dr. Ashford himself had written, Describe the medical condition that will cause my death and when it will occur. Florence's eyes opened. She looked at Dr. Ashford with profound sadness. You will die of an apoplexy on June 3rd, 1891. You will be 68 years old. It will happen in your study. while you are writing a letter to your son in London. You will feel a sudden pain in your head, and you will have time to call for your wife before you lose consciousness. You will not wake again. The room fell absolutely silent. Dr. Ashford's hand trembled as he made notes. I am currently 51 years old and in excellent health, he said, his voice hollow. I pray you are wrong, child, but I shall document this prediction. All 7 envelopes were opened and verified. Florence had answered every question correctly without breaking the seals. 17 witnesses signed testimonies confirming what they had observed. On October 15th, Dr. William Thornbury arrived from Manchester Royal Infirmary, summoned by Dr. Ashford's urgent telegram. A specialist in diseases of the nervous system, educated at Cambridge and trained in Vienna under Dr. Theodore Maynard, Dr. Thornbury represented the cutting edge of Victorian neurological science. His initial report, preserved in the Manchester Medical Society archives, documented his profound skepticism. I anticipated discovering either fraud or mental illness, Dr. Thornbury wrote. What I encountered defied both explanations. He subjected Florence to 3 days of rigorous examination. He tested her memory, her reasoning, her perception. He searched for signs of epilepsy, hysteria, or delusional disorder. He found a perfectly healthy, remarkably intelligent child who happened to possess impossible knowledge. On October 18th, Dr. Thornbury conducted an experiment that transformed his skepticism into alarmed fascination. He brought Florence to the village cemetery and asked her to describe the contents of graves she had never seen opened. She walked among the headstones, pausing occasionally, speaking in that same formal, distant voice. This grave contains a woman named Alice Morrison, Florence said, standing before a stone marked only with initials and a death date of 1842. She was buried with her wedding ring, a locket containing her daughter's hair, and a small Bible. The coffin has collapsed on the left side due to water damage. Dr. Thornbury obtained permission to exhume the grave. Every detail Florence described was verified. The coffin had indeed collapsed on the left side. The ring, locket, and Bible were recovered exactly as she had stated. This child perceives information across temporal and physical boundaries that should be impenetrable, Dr. Thornbury concluded in his official report. She demonstrates knowledge of past events she never witnessed, present circumstances she cannot observe, and future occurrences that have not yet transpired. I can offer no medical explanation. The phenomenon appears genuine and it terrifies me. His final note was stark. If this child truly knows the moment of her death, we must consider the possibility that she is correct. As November approached, Florence began revealing other information with increasing frequency. On October 22nd, she told the village blacksmith that his wife, who had been unable to conceive for 7 years, was pregnant. 3 weeks later, the pregnancy was confirmed. On October 26th, she warned Mr. Davies that his youngest son would fall from the mill ladder on November 2nd and break his left arm. Despite careful supervision, the accident occurred exactly as predicted. The most disturbing prophecy came on October 30th. Florence approached Reverend Blackwood after Sunday service and spoke quietly. Your brother in Liverpool will die on November 9th. He will not suffer. His heart will simply stop while he sleeps. You should write to him now, Reverend. Tell him you love him. Reverend Blackwood had not mentioned his brother to anyone in the village. The two had been estranged for 15 years, following a bitter inheritance dispute. The Reverend's hands shook as he drafted a letter that evening, breaking years of silence. On November 9th, a telegram arrived from Liverpool. Reverend Blackwood's brother had died peacefully in his sleep. The death certificate, signed by a Liverpool physician, listed the cause as cardiac arrest. The time of death, approximately 3 o'clock in the morning. Reverend Blackwood stood before his congregation the following Sunday and spoke words that would be recorded in church records. I came to this village believing that God's mysteries could be understood through reason and Scripture alone. Florence Thornton has shown me that there are depths to creation that exceed our comprehension. Whether her knowledge comes from divine source or some faculty of human consciousness we have yet to understand, I cannot say. But I know it is real, and I know that we must prepare ourselves for November 14th. On November 7th, Dr. Marcus Pemberton arrived from the Home Office in London, accompanied by 2 officials from the Society for Psychical Research. The government had received reports of the Lancashire prophecy child and dispatched investigators to determine if the matter posed any threat to public order or if the phenomenon warranted official documentation. Dr. Pemberton, a stern man of military bearing, conducted his examination with clinical detachment. He interviewed all witnesses, reviewed Dr. Thornberry's notes, and subjected Florence to additional tests. His official report, classified until 1957, concluded, "The child demonstrates capabilities that cannot be explained by current scientific understanding. Her predictions have proven accurate in 17 documented cases. The phenomenon appears genuine." The Home Office officials attempted to convince Margaret Thornton to allow Florence to be taken to London for further study. Margaret refused absolutely. "My daughter has 6 days left," she said, her voice breaking. "She will spend them at home with those who love her. You will not take her from me." Dr. Pemberton did not press the matter. Instead, he established a watch schedule, ensuring that credible witnesses would be present continuously until November 14th. He arranged for a medical stenographer to document everything that occurred. His final instruction to Dr. Ashford was stark: record everything. If this child dies as predicted, it will be the most thoroughly documented case of precognition in modern history. The officials withdrew, but remained in the village, waiting for November 14th. November 14th, 1873, dawned gray and cold. Florence woke at her usual hour and helped her mother prepare breakfast, though Margaret could barely see through her tears. The child ate sparingly, dressed in her blue Sunday dress with the white collar, and sat by the window reading her Bible. At 11 o'clock, Dr. Ashford arrived, along with Dr. Thornbury, Reverend Blackwood, and Miss Hartley. The medical stenographer positioned himself in the corner with his notebook. Margaret Thornton sat beside her daughter, holding her right hand, praying in whispered desperation. Florence remained calm. She spoke to each person in turn, thanking them for their kindness. To her mother, she said, "Do not grieve too long, Mama. William and Sarah need you. I shall be with Papa, and I shall be happy." At noon, the church bells rang for service. Florence lifted her head, listening. "I can hear them," she said softly, "just as I knew I would." At 2 o'clock, her breathing began to shallow. Dr. Ashford placed his stethoscope against her chest, monitoring her heartbeat. Dr. Thornbury checked her pulse. Both physicians recorded steady, if weakening, vital signs. There was no disease, no injury, no medical cause for her decline. At 2:45, Florence's right hand went limp in her mother's grasp. Miss Hartley moved to her left side and took that hand instead, exactly as Florence had predicted. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, sending light through the curtains, creating patterns on the wall. At 3 minutes before 3 o'clock, Florence looked at her mother one final time. "I love you, Mama," she whispered. "Tell William and Sarah I love them too." At precisely 3 o'clock, Dr. Ashford's stethoscope detected the final heartbeat. Florence Thornton's gray eyes closed. Her breathing stopped. Her pulse ceased. The medical stenographer recorded the exact time. 3:00 p.m., November 14th, 1873. The child had predicted the exact moment of her death 6 weeks in advance, and she had been correct to the minute. Dr. Ashford and Dr. Thornberry performed a complete post-mortem examination the following day, with Reverend Blackwood present as witness. The autopsy revealed a perfectly healthy child, no heart defect, no hidden tumor, no poison in her system, no physical cause of death whatsoever. The heart simply stopped, Dr. Ashford recorded in his report. There is no medical explanation for this cessation. The child was, by every measurable standard, in excellent health at the moment of her death. It is as though her consciousness simply decided to depart her body, and her physical form complied. Dr. Thornberry's final report to the Manchester Medical Society was equally baffled. "We have documented a case of death by prediction. The child announced her death, provided specific details about the circumstances, and died exactly as she foretold. We can verify that she possessed no knowledge of any life-threatening condition. We can confirm that 17 of her other predictions proved accurate. We can state with certainty that she knew things she could not possibly have known through normal sensory channels. What we cannot do is explain how any of this was possible." The medical stenographer's complete transcript ran to 47 pages, documenting every word spoken, every vital sign measured, every moment of Florence's final hours. The Home Office classified the report, noting in their files, "Phenomenon genuine but inexplicable. No further investigation recommended." Florence was buried in St. Michael's Churchyard on November 17th. Reverend Blackwood conducted the service. 300 villagers attended, many weeping openly. Margaret Thornton stood at the graveside, supported by William and Sarah, her face a mask of grief. On the headstone she had inscribed, "Florence Margaret Thornton, 1865-1873. She knew, and she was not afraid." In 1957, when the Home Office declassified documents related to Victorian psychical research, Florence Thornton's case file was discovered by Dr. Helen Morrison, a psychiatrist researching historical cases of precognition. The 47-page stenographic record, Dr. Ashford's journal, Dr. Thornberry's medical reports, and the sworn testimonies of 17 witnesses provided unprecedented documentation of an impossible event. Dr. Morrison published her findings in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research in 1959. She noted, "The Florence Thornton case represents the most thoroughly documented example of death premonition in medical literature. The child predicted not only her death but 17 other events, all of which were verified by credible witnesses. The medical evidence confirms she had no physical condition that would cause sudden death. Modern cardiology might suggest sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, but this diagnosis fails to explain her advanced knowledge or her other accurate predictions." In 1991, researchers at the University of Manchester used modern statistical analysis to evaluate the probability of Florence's predictions occurring by chance. The mathematical conclusion was stark. The odds were less than 1 in several billion. Dr. James Ashford died on June 3, 1891, exactly as Florence had predicted. He suffered an apoplexy while writing to his son. His wife found him unconscious in his study. He never regained consciousness. The death certificate, preserved in Lancashire archives, confirms every detail of Florence's 18-year-old prophecy. The case remains unexplained. The documentation remains unimpeached. The mystery endures. Florence Thornton's case was not unique in Victorian medical literature. In 1847, 12-year-old Anna Fitzgerald of Dublin predicted her death 3 months in advance, dying at the exact hour she specified. In 1889, 7-year-old Thomas Whitmore of Cornwall announced he would die on his 8th birthday, and did so, despite perfect health. The London Medical Repository documented 14 similar cases between 1820 and 1900. These cases challenged Victorian understanding of consciousness and mortality. They suggested that human awareness might extend beyond the immediate present, that some individuals could perceive future events through mechanisms science couldn't explain. The phenomenon raised profound questions about the nature of time, the relationship between mind and body, and whether death was purely a physical event or involved some element of conscious participation. Modern neuroscience has yet to provide adequate explanations for these thoroughly documented Victorian mysteries. Margaret Thornton never recovered from her daughter's death. She continued her laundry work, raising William and Sarah to adulthood. But neighbors reported that she often visited Florence's grave, speaking to the headstone as though her daughter could hear. She died in 1891 at age 53 and was buried beside Florence. William Thornton became a school teacher, dedicating his career to educating working-class children in his sister's memory. Sarah married and named her first daughter Florence. The family preserved all documents related to the case, eventually donating them to the Lancashire County Archives in 1923. Miss Hartley kept a journal entry dated November 14, 1873, discovered after her death in 1902. I held Florence's hand as she died exactly as she said I would. In that moment, I felt no fear from her, only peace. She had prepared us all for this moment, and in doing so, she had given us the gift of acceptance. I do not understand how she knew, but I know that she faced death with more courage than I've witnessed in any adult. She was 8 years old, and she taught us all how to die with grace. Florence Thornton knew the unknowable. She predicted her death with impossible precision and demonstrated knowledge that transcended normal human perception. Her case, documented by physicians, witnessed by clergy, verified by government officials, and validated by modern statistical analysis, stands as one of history's most compelling mysteries. What does this tell us about consciousness, about the boundaries between present and future, about the nature of death itself? If this story has made you question the limits of human awareness, consider subscribing to explore more documented cases that challenge everything we think we know about reality. Some mysteries demand to be witnessed. Florence Thornton's story is one of them.